Thank you for joining me today. It's Sunday afternoon, noon Central Standard Time, December 17th, 2023. And we're here for what we've been calling a board game design diary update on High and Low, the New York City Noir mystery detective game that I've been working on. It's great to see so many people here. Let me just check in with the chat, make sure everything's okay. Adam is here. We're going to be showing some of Adam's work. My old friend Zach is here. Debbie, who's been helping with editing. Jonathan, longtime viewer of the channel. Okay, so let's talk about the plan for today and how we're going to structure this conversation. This is the second, I can see the cat's tail in the background. This is the second design diary. I'm going to be a little more brief about overarching ideas here because I covered them so much in the first designer diary, but I am going to recover some of it briefly. Before we get started, let me just say that a little bit of bookkeeping here. In the last week or so, we've been playing through Penny Dreadfuls, this brand new mystery game from the makers of Letters from Whitechapel. And we played our last game on Friday, and it really went off the rails. It was fascinating to see all the pieces come apart and glitch out. And, but it's been enjoyable and fun and interesting, and lots of interesting game design related issues. I wouldn't recommend it to a player who wanted a great time, but I would recommend it in terms of new game mechanics ideas for mystery games. We are going to play the final case of that in the next day or two, possibly even tonight if I can get some sleep, tonight or tomorrow. And then the other thing that's going to happen is that I'm sort of working on a deadline here to finish to work on this game. There's a local game design contest here in Champaign, Illinois called Kudo Plays. There's a new the next deadline is December 20th for the rule book, which I've been working on. We'll talk about that. But after December 20th, I'm going to have some time. I'll be here over Christmas and New Year streaming, and I think we're going to try to play one of the biggest mystery games that I own, a cozy killer game, which is in 12 parts and was like $400. So if you're interested in an epic experience, mystery narrative experience, that will be later this week. And I see my chat is having a little bit of trouble connecting, but looks like the live stream's okay. 21 viewers in the chat. If you like content like this, I hope you will consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up. Okay, let's look at what I've got here for our outline. This is how we're going to do these discussions, at least these early diary live streams. I've got a bunch to talk about. I'm just going to talk for a while. If you've got comments in the chat, just write them, questions, whatever, and I'll occasionally check in with the chat and get to those questions. As we go forward with this series, we'll spend much more time just talking back and forth. But for these early streams, I've got so much to say and talk about that I'm just going to talk. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little background about what High and Low is. Talk about what's new since the last live stream, which was 2 months ago. We'll look at some of the changes to the directories and maps. I'll talk a little bit about the benefits of this being a data-driven system. Then we're going to look at some artwork. That's going to be the most exciting part, because I can't wait to show you some of the artwork by two people, one of whom Adam is in the channel, Adam Hall. Another one, Logan, isn't. But that's the part to stay tuned for. And then maybe if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about an issue that I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is formulating a sort of philosophy for the design and answering questions. There are constantly design questions that come up in this game. And it seems to me we don't have a great philosophy framework for answering those questions. They're sort of being decided ad hoc based on intuition. And I'm interested in exploring the idea of a philosophy for the design of a mystery game. We'll talk about some timelines and deadlines, and then maybe if we have time, which we probably won't, we'll talk about some more exotic mechanics being considered. So let me say this thing first, right before I jump in. This is not intended to be a commercially viable project. So we don't have to worry about making any money, about sales, about making a profit. On the other hand, this is a project that's going to get finished and polished and be professional. So we don't have to worry about cost of things. It's okay if it couldn't make a profit, if it's not sellable, but it is important to get it finished. So there's a Discord channel for this YouTube channel called For Two, and there's a bunch of channels for discussing this game and brainstorming. And if you're interested in participating, I'd love to have you stop by the Discord. There's a link on the YouTube About page. But a big chunk of that discussion is sort of some of the people who are very skilled and well-meaning trying to aim for perfection, and on the other hand, there's me saying this has to get done eventually. So that's where I come down on this. I'm going to try to reset the chat because it's complaining about not being connected. Let's see if that helps. All right, so let's look at our slides here. Okay, let's get started. Introduction. Okay, I've already talked about the format. I'm going to mostly talk, but then we can check in with the chat every once in a while. Okay, what is High and Low? High and Low is the working title for a narrative mystery detective game, very much in the vein of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. If you're not familiar with that game, behind me I have this green box by Dave Neal called the Baker Street Irregulars. Far off in the corner there, you see Bureau of Investigation, investigations into Arkham and elsewhere, and then off that you can't see are some of the expansions. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective came out in 1980, 1981. It's still being played. There are still fan-made cases for it. Space Cowboys reprinted a bunch of them. And it is essentially a reading game and deduction. You basically try to figure out mysteries broken into cases. That's the closest cousin to what we're doing here. And Gumshoe was a very ambitious game. You can see behind me in blue that had 10 cases. That's probably the very closest inspiration for this game. But part of what I'm interested in doing is exploring many of the ideas we've talked about, critiques of some of these games, and how could you make them better? In what ways can we take the best of them and test out some theories of what makes these games good and what would be more interesting? And of course, the other thing that's different is this one is set in New York City, where I grew up. Okay, so High and Low is the working title from an Akira Kurosawa film, which was based on a noir paperback novel of New York City cops originally. Some people don't love the name. Another title that we've been bouncing around is New York Noir. And I've already said here, one of the issues I'm really interested in exploring is taking some of our theories of what makes these games good and when they fail and implementing them here. And I view this project as two parts. One is an open source set of directories, maps, rules that anyone could use to make fan cases. I've made videos on how good the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective fan cases are. One of the people that's written some of the best Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective fan cases is in the channel here, Martinez Conradi, and he's been working with me to work on a case for High and Low. So that's the first part, and I think my attention has shifted mostly towards that these days. And then I have my own campaign that I've sketched out and started writing, set in this world that I'd love help on as well. But I think of those as two separate projects, and the first one is what has gotten my attention lately. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the new stuff since October 8th. Mostly I've been working on directories, and it feels like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill. Months pass and I look and it looks basically the same, but almost all of what I've been doing is writing more code in Python to produce directories, to produce different stuff, to create locations and create them in a way, populate the city in a way that feels real and is useful for gameplay. Most of what I've been doing in the last month or so has been adding real places to the directories, and that's what we're going to look at here. So there are about 2,000, little more than 2,000 real places that have been added to this world now. In addition, so the code that's creating these directories, the yellow pages and the white pages and the reverse directory, is essentially combining filling New York City of the 30s with real places and then filling in with fictional places. And I've talked about my theory for how that should be done based on an idea I had. And that idea was that we're running a real risk by having such a large city, that it will feel overwhelming, impersonal, and we're going to have to work hard to make it feel like a manageable place. And I've talked about how we had this odd experience playing one of these play-by-mail games called FromMurdersByMail.com, a cozy case set in a small town. And it was shocking how much it seemed like we didn't really want to be in a small town. We wanted to play a case in LA in the 30s and this noir feeling. But in reality, when we played the small town case, it felt more manageable. We could sort of remember who people were, where they were. So my theory was to make this game, make High and Low, make New York City a city of neighborhoods, where each neighborhood has a distinct personality. And so a lot of the effort that has gone into what I'm going to show you here has been to try to make each neighborhood have a real distinct personality, sort of exaggerating the ethnicity breakdowns, exaggerating the specialties, and then populating these neighborhoods as sort of self-contained neighborhoods. Now, there are 35 neighborhoods in Manhattan, mostly covers Manhattan. And I think a given case will probably be largely focused on one neighborhood at a time. So I'm going to show you a little bit about that. So let's take a look at that. So here are my printouts. I've done these all in 8.5 by 11. The maps I showed you last time, I've also made a 13 by 19 version of the map atlas. But we're going to work with these 8.5 by 11s for now. All right, so don't look at that cover for now. That's for later. Okay, so here are our 4 main directories that will get played through. The maps you've seen before, but there have been some changes since the last stream. So let me just show you the format of this, actually. So there's an overview of Manhattan and all the neighborhoods and where they're located and their names. It's all organized alphabetically by their little prefix here. So these are all real neighborhoods in Manhattan. Lots of debate in real life about the names and boundaries. They're a little fuzzy, but let me just show you what this book looks like. Now, I had shown this before. These are basically the same maps as before. We've done actually quite a bit of revisiting of neighborhoods and tweaking these around, adding a couple, breaking them down a little differently from what I showed on the last stream. We've also finished writing the first draft of each neighborhood guide information, which these are sort of combined. So each page has a map of a neighborhood with numbered locations, and then a description of that neighborhood with a little bit of history and overview, which is meant to set the tone for this neighborhood. And then each one also now has a list of points of interest. This one's got a couple, let's see if I can give you a closer look here. Okay, so we've got a couple of music and opera halls, some bars, some theaters, dancing, ballrooms, charities, hotels. These are all real places. They're all real places from New York City in the 30s and 40s. Next to each one is a number. That's the number on the block number on the neighborhood map. Bowery is a fairly small area. In fact, most of the neighborhoods have 100 blocks. We've carved out the Bowery because it's such a storied, important location in Manhattan, a pretty seedy location. And then you can see the neighboring neighborhoods are labeled and shown sort of grayed out. And there's your overview of Manhattan where the Bowery is. All right, let's go back. Let's just leaf through some of these. So for each of these, we've got a little photo, again, history overview that's meant to tell you the background and unique points of interest on the map. You can also see other information on these maps. All of the subway stations in Manhattan have been recreated where they really are. So currently on the maps, I'm showing a couple of icons, just a few. I'm showing this icon here when there's a police precinct. Every neighborhood has a police precinct. There's bus stops. There's bus stops only on the west side of Manhattan. They are bus lines that run east-west. Again, a little bit of a simplification from real Manhattan. The subway stops are all here and in their correct places. All right, so now, and the color coding could still be adjusted, but basically we've got red for maritime dock areas, green for parks. The grays are almost exclusively office, commercial space. No, the grays are mixed. The yellows are commercial and the blues are pure residential. We're here down in the Civic Center, which is almost no residential. That's why you're not seeing any pure blue. And then here is a more residential neighborhood, Central Harlem. You can see a little sneaking in of Central Park. Okay, so you get the idea here. The photos are sometimes big, sometimes small, depending on how much space we have left. But these are all things that will get worked on. All of this text needs more improvement, but the first draft is done. Michelle Hin, one of my friends here from Champaign, has been working hard work on all of this stuff. Mainly, we've been using the WPA book, which is this public works book that New York City, part of this big project that New York City went and did all these history books. Okay, so what do I want? Let me just check in with the chat, see if there's anything to address. No, okay, no one has got any questions that I have to answer. All right, so if you'll remember, let me just give you, before I show you a little bit more here, let me give you a refresher course on how this works. So in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, there's one big map. Here we've got a game that's about 7 times the size of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. So it's broken up into neighborhoods, 35 neighborhoods. There are some extra maps at the end. There's a map of the subway. This will have to be redone. Then there's a map of maps of the outer boroughs. And my idea here is that maybe at some point we'll make standalone cases for some of these outer boroughs. Brooklyn in particular has got great history and details. But for now, they're here in a sort of minor fashion, and I'm going to show you how they're here. These are existing maps from a market analysis book, and Adam Hall, one of the artists, is thinking he might be able to redo these in some nice style for us. And then we've got an overview map showing where Manhattan fits in to some surrounding boroughs. We've got Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx up here, and some extra islands. We've got Rikers Island over here, the Statue of Liberty, and Governor's Island. So these are, and then there's New Jersey over here. So I'll show you how I intend to handle that, but this would just sort of try to set the context for where you are. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this in a second, but I want to remind you how the game works. We've got our map. We've got our white pages. These are alphabetical. Just to give you some idea, I think this has got about 7,000, 8,000 people and several thousand commercial businesses. These are all alphabetical. You can probably see the difference that the businesses and government offices are slightly in red. The people are in black. You can see each one has a street address. This isn't strictly necessary because here's your shorthand of how to find it on the maps. So the consulate of Japan is in the TB neighborhood, that's Turtle Bay 13. So if you wanted to look this up, the consulate of Japan, you'd go to Turtle Bay under T. Here's Turtle Bay. And consulate of Japan is TB13. So if you wanted to spatially localize it, you'd look for TB13, which is right here. So that the consulate of Japan is somewhere in there. If you wanted to follow that lead, that just helps you spatially localize it if it's important. Usually it's not, but for some things it will. There's the actual street address, if that would be relevant for you in some way. And then lastly is the lead number. These are all randomized. This 5-digit lead, 73290, that's what you would look up in the lead book to see what happens when you go there or phone there. It's sort of made to look like a phone number, but most of the time you'll actually be visiting there. Now, all of the people here are fictional. I mean, there are some real people sprinkled in, but mostly they're fictional. You'll see there are some repeat last names. Some people have chosen to have only their initial listed, some their full name. Occasionally you'll get someone like Donovan, Aurelia Donovan, doesn't have an address listed. There's no way to know where she is. but there's her phone number. You will occasionally get relatives living nearby. It's very frequently the thing that generates the directories tries to be clever. It often creates places that are based on a family. Let's see if we can find one here. Here, if you look here at Fajardo's Ethnic Foods, see if I can zoom in a little bit for you. I've talked about this before. I'm pretty proud of this. Fajardo's Ethnic Foods is on 40 West 135th Street. That's obviously someone's shop, and here that person is, or actually here's probably, there's like a couple of them with that name, but one of them probably lives nearby that shop. So that person is actually a Negro Harlem. We can talk about that, the name of that neighborhood in a second, but there they live. That shop is on the 73rd block of Negro Harlem, and you can see here's probably the person who runs it, Fajardo T. He lives right next door, Negro Harlem 75 block. So he lives 2 blocks away. So when this thing is creating these people and these businesses, it's often putting them with some probability right next door in the neighborhood or a little bit further away. There's a huge attempt made by my code to make these neighborhoods self-sufficient. So every neighborhood basically has at least a bank or two, a hotel, a hat shop, a grocery store. Each neighborhood is fictionally forced to be a sort of standalone, self-contained thing. The other thing I talked about before, but I'm so proud of it that I like to show it off more, is, okay, so these are all the people. Now, occasionally, if you look, you'll see an entry that looks like this. So let's look at Gaffney Igis and Candy Gagnon. Okay, so they both have addresses that have apartment numbers. And you might say, well, what is that, just their street address happens to be apartment? Lots of apartments in New York City and Manhattan specifically. So I'm going to show you something here. Let's take this one example. Candy Gagnon, she lives in YV, that's the Yorkville neighborhood, 47. Yorkville 47. She lives in Gracie Square, apartment 2A. Let me just put this aside for a second. Okay, so she lives in Yorkville 47. This is the reverse directory. This is a new idea that's not in Sherlock Holmes. This is arranged by neighborhood. Yorkville is YV, so it's going to be all the way at the end. And this directory tells you what's near someone. So I was running out of ink, so it's a little harder to see, but let's see here. Okay, so where was she? Here. No. Where did I have her? There we go. Candy Gagnon, Yorkville 47. So if we go now to Yorkville 47, 47th block of Yorkville, we can see, where is she? There she is, C. Gagnon, apartment 2A. So there's another way to find her lead. It's the same lead you'll find under her name here. Where did I keep losing her? Yeah, okay. So there she is. But now you can see she lives in the Yorkville Apartments. That's her address, 11 Gracie Square, with a whole bunch of other people living in that apartment. So if she was our murder victim in 2A, maybe we would stop by and visit her next door neighbor, knock on his door, see if he heard anything. And again, that's Yorkville 47. If you wanted to spatially locate that, you'd go to the Yorkville map and you'd look for 47, and there is her, where her apartment is located. These are blocks, could be lots of buildings in each block, but there we go, on Gracie Square, that's where she is. So that's the reverse directory, that's the white pages. that's how the system works. So now let me show you. I also should mention the other thing that I think is cool is that you could also, for these apartments, the apartments themselves have a lead number. So that would be equivalent to like talking to the doorman or the maintenance worker at the apartment building. Now, one thing that's new since the last thing is that all of these places are much more real. So the apartments, in fact, let's go to the yellow pages and see the apartments. The apartments are much more likely to be real apartment buildings in Manhattan at the time. There were some famous ones. And so now we're going to look at the yellow pages. And there's some new stuff here. I've just printed it on yellow stuff to make it more thematic. So much of the work over the last month or so has been gone into the business directory and the categories, organizing categories and adding real places. So you see, we start with an index here, and we've been arguing about the breakdown of these categories. They're taken from real yellow pages, but my idea is to have this be a manageable number. At least that will fit on one page. You can see occasionally it says department stores, see also variety stores and 5 and dimes. So they refer to each other. Now, getting page numbers is not as easy as you would think because it's all generated in code and it doesn't quite know how it's going to lay out. But we'll talk about that in a second. So if we look at apartment buildings here, we could actually go to it. Now, here's the a major thing that got done is this now has real ads throughout it. So there it is. It's about, I think it's about 80 pages now. So we've got a little more than 2,000 real places sprinkled in with fictional places and real ads from real yellow pages from the 20s, actually, most of these. The ads are all under the real place, so you'll see the place. This is Horton's Ice Cream, and here's an ad for Horton's Ice Cream. It's at 205 East 24th Street. There's its map, its block number on the map, and there's the lead if you want to visit it. And I've had a bunch of help doing this kind of stuff. Rob and Alex, and more recently, Water has been helping me process these. There's some issue about, is it important that this font is so small? And maybe we'll cut down the number of ads here. I've just added as many as we've got, but we may reduce this. So anyway, if you go to apartments, you can see here are apartment buildings here in Manhattan. Named apartment buildings at least, and we would find that woman's apartment located where it should be, and that's got the lead number that was of the maintenance man or whatever. So if you heard about some apartment building, I'd say maybe 70% of these are real apartment buildings existing. When I say that, I mean it's the right name at the right location that existed at the time. Let's see. There are some, if you want to see where are our private detectives area, because I put a bunch of extra ads in with the private detective and some little Easter eggs here. So here's our private investigators. So these are all real private investigators at the time, but I've sprinkled in some Easter eggs from some of our favorite games companies. So there you go. Maybe some of these yellow pages ads will be removed, but you've got a couple special sections here. Here's subway and bus stops, every subway stop in Manhattan. And then I guess the other thing that I did want to show you was this section here. So I've said that this is mostly set in Manhattan, but I do want to make a way for case authors to have some action that happens out of Manhattan. So we've got basically for each of the other boroughs, we've got a section for each of their districts. And these match up with those maps that I showed you earlier. So if you knew someone, and you might think of this as making a phone call to the Brooklyn precinct in Flatbush to hear if they've caught wind of your suspect that's on the run. And the maps all show places where you could leave Manhattan bridges and tunnels, so you might track them there. And then there are a couple other places. Here are surrounding islands. So if you wanted to visit Ellis Island or Rikers Island, if someone was locked up, or if someone was getting on an airplane here, the airfields are not in Manhattan. You might go to Floyd Bennett Airfield here, or in Newark, you might go to the Newark airport. Okay, so there you go. I think we will be adding more ads, scanning another couple hundred ads or so, and then maybe deciding which ones to keep. Maybe we'll figure out, maybe get rid of the ones with the tiny fonts. Okay. So that's the 4 major directories I've showed you. And then in my notes here, what have I made a note for? Okay, so I haven't talked this time about the ethnic distributions of people using ethnic names in the different neighborhoods. I spent some time talking about that in the first live stream, so I won't go into all that. I did talk about some of this other stuff. Okay, I talked about most of that, actually. Okay, so I did want to talk a little bit about the data-driven nature. So it's creating all these people through code and locations. And I told you one of the main reasons of that is so that the code can ensure that each neighborhood is sort of a standalone, self-sufficient place that you could stage a case in. But I want to show you some of the directories, some of the data that a player wouldn't get. So a player would get these directories and use them to play. But let me see if I can show you a couple other things just to give you a flavor for what the data what making all this from data lets us do. So let's see, does this work? Okay. So here's our reverse directory. You saw that, but let me show you a couple other things. And there's our yellow page. Oops. There's our yellow pages. We saw that. Okay. So here's an example of a directory. 300-page directory. This wouldn't be printed. This wouldn't be for players. But if you were writing a case, this is essentially white pages and yellow pages combined, organized by neighborhood. So, for example, if your case was set in the Bloomingdale neighborhood, here are the white pages just for Bloomingdale. Here are the people that live just in Bloomingdale, arranged by letter. And then followed by that, here are the businesses just in Bloomingdale. So you can see there are the apartment buildings in Bloomingdale. There's one accountant. There's one antique shop. There's one church. There's one department store, Altman's, Bloomingdale branch. There are a couple doctors. There's a drugstore. There's a florist. There's a gas station. There's a cemetery. There's a carpet and rug store. There's one cafe. There's one candy store. There's a grocery store, there's 3 hotels. So there you go. So if you were writing your case just in this neighborhood, you could pull this up and work with this information to help you craft a case that was mainly in this location, or maybe these people know each other who are in this one neighborhood. The neighborhoods are tight. So there you go. And then here's the Bowery. The people live in the Bowery, and the different neighborhoods have different ethnic breakdowns and names. So they're likely to have ethnic appropriate names for a neighborhood, and then here are the yellow pages for the Bowery. So I'm hoping this will help an author who wants to make a case. Here's Civic Center, very few residents in the Civic Center, lots of government buildings. So you can see the white pages is mostly commercial businesses, very few people actually living there. And there's the businesses and stuff. Okay, so you get the idea. There's that directory. That's 300 pages. What else do we have? In a similar way, here's the ethnic breakdowns. Now, I have exaggerated the ethnic breakdowns of neighborhoods, and but let's just look at this. So here you have the Arabic. These might be thought of as the representative Arabic people in the neighborhoods and where they're located. And by looking, they're organized by neighborhoods. You could see where most of them are in the Lower East Side. Then we've got black people of black. I'm not sure exactly. I mean, obviously, this is exaggerated and it's mixed, but you can see basically what I've done. Then I've got British ancestry. They are not all by racial groups. Some of them are, well, celebrities, Chinese people. You can see this. This is also a nice way to sort of debug it, to check the names being used to see if they feel appropriate. You can see how much of the Chinese population in the game is centered in Chinatown, a very dense area of Manhattan. Not all, but lots of it. And then you've got some Czech, some Dutch descendants, French, German, Jewish, etc. So there you go. I'm not sure how useful this would be, but it is useful for testing stuff. Let's see, what else have we, is there any we haven't looked at here? I guess that's mostly, there are a couple other directories that I have that show just the real places, in case you wanted to make a case just set in real places, etc. All right, let me check in with the chat before I show you some other stuff. Martinez has been working on a case. Okay. And says the focus on one neighborhood is very useful. Okay, so what have I got in my list for next? Aha, okay. Now we're getting, you've suffered through that stuff. Now we're gonna talk about some artwork. I'm gonna look at Logan's sketches and Adam's stuff. Okay, but so this would be a good time to lead up into the artwork, to start showing you some artwork. Let me show you one area of artwork. So Adam Hall, who's a very accomplished artist who may still be in the chat, has been working on some art in different respects. I'm going to show you some cover art, but let me show you the idea for making these maps feel a little more real and lived in. So Adam's been working a little bit on one neighborhood map, and it is Hell's Kitchen. So let's look at Hell's Kitchen. Okay, there's Hell's Kitchen. So you can see the idea here and what Adam has done. First of all, in our neighborhood guide, we've got points of interest. And so Adam has started, for the points of interest, making little illustrations. So let's take a look here at a park. DeWitt Clinton Park has got a custom little drawing. What I love about this is it almost suggests, you could almost imagine a crime happening here where someone was killed behind the tree, a witness. Like you could almost, this almost lays out a specific little case. It almost makes you think of a case that could have happened in that park. And then Adam's drawn a little custom cop symbol, which will probably replace our precinct symbols. But then look how he's done for little points of interest, little 3D. Here's Madison Square Garden. And he's done these little isometric images. I think this is going to make a huge difference between making these maps feel sort of sterile and like they could be anywhere, to making it feel like real lived-in places and closer to a map that you would see in real life. And it will also help you locate. It will help bring these points of interest from this text to feeling more real. Like you'll say, oh, here's a park, DeWitt Clinton Park, here is one point of interest, and then you could actually go and see it here. And I think the correspondence between having illustrations for the points of interest is nice. again, you could visit these places if they involved your story. And the other thing, in addition to just adding a lot of flavor and making these neighborhoods feel more lived in, and then I think we'll be replacing these little boats with more realistic stuff. And I love the idea of having text here so you can see these places. The other thing it really suggests, and we'll have to see if it can be done, which is that obviously the real Manhattan, one of the things that stands out is these big giant skyscrapers. And so I wonder if for an occasional point of interest that's a skyscraper, if Adam can't figure out a way to sort of show it, you put the base where it is, it has to not block these numbers, but I really wonder if we can't, for the couple of points of interest that are big, giant buildings, Empire State Building, whatever, it couldn't actually be drawn as a little isometric giant building to give the players a feel of height in this game, which is something that's sort of missing from these maps and can be found in some other hand-done maps of the time. Anyway, so that's one of the things Adam's working on. I love these. I think this is going to make this is going to be one of these. I mean, one of the real dangers of having a game with 35 maps of each neighborhood is that they all feel the same and that they don't even feel like real places. And I think this is going to make a huge difference. And maybe you'll remember, like you've been there, you've been to this place. Okay, and a sense of scale, if there's a church that occupies the whole block, maybe you'll really get a feel for scale rather than just saying something is in here somewhere. Okay, so that's one of the things that Adam has been working on. I want to talk now about Logan's sketches. All right, so let me bring these up, and then an idea I had and something I'm really excited about as an idea. So let me bring these up. Okay, let's bring them up full. Okay, so Logan has been working on making sketches of people, portraits. And we can use all the art we can get in this game to put anywhere. And if you played Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, the newer versions by Space Cowboys, you notice that there's art in the casebook. When you're reading a lead, there'll be a piece of art. It's rarely associated with a specific lead. It's sort of generic art, and often we see it and we say, am I supposed to see this? Like it might be a picture of an item or a person, and it's detached from the case. And what I thought of when looking at these sketches is the idea of fixing that in an exciting way. And here's what I came up with. We're going to make our main detective have a hobby of sketching people. It's part of the story. So while he's walking around meeting people, he might occasionally be sketching them. Maybe he's on the subway ride home, sketching someone across from him. Maybe he's sketching a witness. Maybe he's sketching a suspect description, like a witness is describing someone to him. This is going to be a hobby of his. Maybe he's sketching a love interest. He'll be making these sketches as he's running around in the world. So these will be fully integrated into the story, into the case. You won't just see a random picture on a page. Maybe he's met a gangster here and he's memorable, and so he's drawn a sketch of the guy. Oh, I can't draw on this properly. Okay, so I think that's going to be a really nice little way to make these sketches feel much more integrated. It also then allows it, like, he's not a professional artist. These look quite good, but it's okay. They don't have to be perfect. They're quick sketches that he's made, and that also hopefully lets us collect more of these. Logan's going to keep making these, and hopefully we'll have tons of them. And then there's another very clever little thing that we can do here, which is this. Notice that these are not being made after a character. So it's not like the story has written a character and now Logan has tried to draw them matching their description. Logan is just drawing a large collection of faces. And the way I see it is that a case author, including a fan-made case author, that we would have these as a collection, and someone could say, hey, that looks like the woman in my case. Can I claim that sketch and use it in mine? And maybe this would even give you an inspiration. Like, I'm writing a case, there's a guy, an old guy, he gets killed. Maybe that one, maybe that is my guy. And then you would claim it. You'd say, okay, I want to use these 2 sketches in my case. Can I claim them for my case? And you would claim them, and then you could write them in your storyline and use their sketch in your storyline. So these might provide inspiration for a case, and they would be selected as you're writing your case to be like, okay, this looks like a cool person that they would meet with an oversized personality. He would sketch that person, and then you bring that into your case. Now, these could be in the lead book. I had another idea, though. I mean, I'm a big fan of games where it's like, go retrieve this secret surprise information. So one thing I thought is, maybe these would be in like a little deck, and the game would tell you, go get, you know, card 56. And then you'd say, okay, this is this guy. And maybe it would have information about him. I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but I just printed these to give you some example. This is one of my favorites here. And so maybe these would be hidden surprise, a little bit like Chronicles of Crime, I guess. Maybe we can think of other ways to use these. But I like the idea of you not seeing these and being told to get them. Like, and maybe it'd be fun to sort of collect it. Like, oh, I met someone new. Okay, and then you put him on your wall, pin him up. This could be one of my suspects. Here are my 2 suspects. Stuff like this. Okay. Adam says Red Dead Redemption 2 has this kind of thing, makes it far more immersive experience. So I love those sketches. They feel like that the key in the lock was combining the sketches with this idea that it would be an in-game gives our detective a little bit more personality as the person who sketches things. Okay, so I love that idea. All right. What else we got? Oops, skipped along here. All right, so we looked at Logan's sketches. I talked about integrating them into the game. We could also have sketches of places and locations, and those could actually come into play. Like if our detective is sketched out a scene, the scene of the crime, then you could actually refer to that as a deductive element. Bringing them into the game instead of just illustrations in the book mean they can play a role in the deduction of the game. Okay. Now we're going to look at Adam Hall's cover art. And I want to get some feedback from the channel. Okay, this is pretty exciting here. Let's go and bring up Adam's. Let's see, is this the one we want to look at? Yes, okay. So look at these box cover mock-ups that Adam Hall has made. I mean, these are amazing. And I would love to hear what your rankings are. This just blown me away. Martinez brings up a comment about the sketches that I thought of as well. Like, our main detective sketches things, but what about other detectives? We're going to return. We'll return to that. We'll have to brainstorm that. But okay, let's spend a moment enjoying these cover mock-ups. And Adam is still going to do a couple more variations of these, But boy, are these beautiful. And look how subtle they are. In case you don't notice, the one in the upper right, you can see the fingerprint in the background, and the B, you can see the fingerprint under the light. So yeah, let's do a poll. Let's see which one you prefer. Let me see. Where's the best? I guess it's going to be covering up some of these if I leave it. All right, type vote and then vote which one you like best. You got to type vote first and then your choice. Let's see what people like best. I know it's problematic because it's covering a couple. Let's see if I go, can I do it? I've got different places to put the vote, but it's a little tricky. Oh, here, it's getting smaller as we go. Okay, lots of votes for B. Megan votes for E. I mean, we're sort of, I don't know what the right term for it is, but we'll make use of all of these. Like, we'll have each chapter of each case or in fan cases are going to need some art on the front, so we'll use all of these at some point. Let's see, 2 for A, 2 for E, 6 for B, including Adam, the artist. I had some theories about B. 7 for B. Okay. More votes. Okay, well, let's keep it up here while there's votes. How can I move it this way? No. If I do it this way, can we see it better? I guess you can see it a little better this way. You can change your vote at any time. Just type vote, same thing again. So let me give you my, looks like we've got most of the votes in. Okay, so looks like B is the winner in the channel. Mickyor says C. Macon says all. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the vote here. Okay, let me show you what my favorite is. This is my favorite, which is C. I love this stylistic view of the detective standing over the city. And the smoke turning into the and. That just, to me, that one really does it for me. But if I look at, let's see, I like all of them. B would be my second choice. The only thing, I love this pose of the detective, and I love where he is. The only thing that I have a trouble with, so some of the people that liked B said they liked how readable the title was, the high and low on this lamppost here. The only thing that gave me qualms about that is that those don't look like New York City street signs to me. And because the game is so focused on realistic street names, I just have a little bit of a tinge of not right in terms of those being the street names. But I had an idea for Adam that maybe if we could put like rain, this was a rainy night, and make this street behind on B. Can I not figure out a way to let me draw on this? Okay, so my idea was maybe make this a sort of rained out street with reflecting pool, and then have the text high and low be reflecting from the street, something like that. Or maybe a building with it written in graffiti here instead of that lamppost. Anyway, just an idea. Adam is still working on making more mock-ups. As I said, we'll use all these. I think they're all fantastic. Okay, let's check in with the chat. Can we, yeah, can't, let's see. Adam says, keep in mind, they're pure concept art. Any files would be more polished. Martina says, Figure C makes the detective look a touch too much like a god. Interesting. I guess that appeals to me a little bit. That does appeal to me metaphorically. The detective here, sitting on top of the city, almost like a god. That I have to admit that appeals to me. Although it's not, the storyline is going to be a little bit more adult and realistic than that. This is not a cartoon case, the campaign at least. Matt says, I also liked E, all the dots connecting from different neighborhoods. Yeah, E with the dots on the map does make you think of a case. And notice what Adam has done with the high and low. The L is a gun and the I is part of the dots of the map. Pretty sweet. The high on the sign, low reflected rain on the street, something like that, yeah. But not reflecting from the sign, just reflecting in the rainy street, like you see in some movies now where they've been putting the titles as if they're projected down. Jonathan Warner says, I enjoy the darker purples in B and C. Makes it feel the right amount of ominous noir. That's why a rain dark night would be nice too. Debbie says, the focus on the detective is a bit much in cover C. Well, we'll use them all. Okay, so, but yeah, pretty amazing. I was telling Adam and Logan, in addition to the art being obviously adding to the game, to the people working on the game, and there are a bunch of people that are helping with this now, but especially me, the difference in morale and motivation to finish this work, to slog through some of the less fun parts, the difference that the art makes in terms of a motivational factor, making it fun to work on this, is huge. It really makes me want to keep going. And the same thing is true for people who are willing to help work on it and write cases. Like, that's what's motivating me now to keep going. All right, let's go back to our thing here. What else? Is there anything left? I showed you that. I think we're basically at the end here. I just put some of this old stuff here that I talked about mostly in the previous diary. So I did want to thank, and try not to forget, I've probably forgotten someone, but thank some of the people that have been working on this with me in the Discord, coordinating mostly in Discord, but helping in various ways. Adam, Hall, and Logan doing the art. Rob and Nicholas have helped quite a bit with some of the graphic design and talking to me about the way things should look. Michelle Hinn has been doing the neighborhood guidebook, working hard on that. That's one of the least fun things to work on. Debbie Levy has been working hard, helping to edit not only the stories and text for the cases that I've talked about in the first diary, but now working on the rule book with me, helping get that polished up. Martinez Conradi, I've been talking about, one of the people that have, the only one really amongst us that has real experience writing real cases for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Martinez has written a bunch of them that are amazing. If he gets involved in this and can figure out a way to make a case set in this world, it's going to be a huge help. And then Matt C., who made our play-by-mail Sherlock Holmes case, is interested in working on a case. And Rob, Alex, and Water in the Discord channel helped me get the yellow page ads and find real places, and everyone else who's just been talking with me about this stuff. I'd love to have more collaborators and volunteers. We can use as many as we can get. More artists making more drawings. If you're interested in writing a case set in this world using this material, I'd love to have you do it. You can make your own detective, your own world, just set with these maps and directories. I'd love to play some supernatural cases if someone wants to write some Cthulhu-themed H.P. Lovecraft stories. If you want to make some social commentary stories, experimental narrative in this world, real history cases, I'd love to see it. I'd be happy to play it with the group. on the channel. We could probably use some real playtesters at some point, especially to help with the fan cases, test them. I really want to make a strong effort to support anyone who wants to write fan cases. So I'm hoping that we can get this in a state and get enough people that if someone says, hey, I want to write a fan case for this, we'll have people that are willing to edit and proof, people that are willing to contribute art to it, and people who are willing to play test it and offer feedback. So I really feel like it would be a good thing if we can get people to help other authors who want to write cases in this world. And then here's this whole separate discussion about philosophy of design, but maybe we need to save that for another. Maybe we'll skip that for a minute, just go here. Let me just wrap up here and then we can talk a little bit. All right, so what's next? I want to increase the frequency of doing these live stream diaries, developer updates, and I've spent this last one and this one just talking really. But I do want to have more of these live streams where we actually have a back and forth and brainstorm about ideas before they get worked out. So I'm hoping to do these 1 or 2 a month now, much more of a brainstorming style, just talking about a new idea, talking about why it would work as a mechanic, why it wouldn't. Trying to formulate a philosophy of design for these games. And I've got a couple slides on that, but maybe we can save that. The next actual deadline is December 20th, and if just a few days, that's when the Kudo Plays, the local game competition here, wants a final version of the rulebook. So we're going to try to get that polished in the next couple of days. It's mostly written, just needs a little bit of tweaking. Is not the most important part of this game. The contest here, the local contest, is also not important for this project. This is not the right game for that because it would take longer. It's a longer game. It's arguably not even a board game. It's just on the outskirts of it. But we are using that contest as helpful deadlines. So December 20th, and then the final submission into that contest is February 10th. And my idea is to take that deadline seriously as a deadline at which point we should have a playable short demo case. So my original idea was that I would try to make a standalone short playable case that could be played in about an hour that just sort of gave you a tour of the systems. But Martinez and I have been talking about what if instead, rather than a standalone demo case just meant to demonstrate everything, what if instead it was day one? What if the demo case, the case that someone could play in an hour or two to acquaint them with the system, was just the first day in a real case? High and low cases I haven't talked about today, but I've talked about previously, are meant to be broken up into multiple days where events happen and you get quizzed and stuff. So the idea of having the demo case be the first day of a larger real case is very appealing to me. It feels right to me. It means you could make the case not try to wrap up in an hour or two and be like a beginning, middle, and end and compelling. You only have to sort of tease the player with the demo case to be like, this is what it will be like as your first day, and you can end on a cliffhanger or whatever. So to me, that feels right. That feels like the right decision, that the short demo case is really going to be day one in a real case. And so it'll just gently introduce you to the mechanics and the ideas, but it doesn't have to wrap up a fully complete storyline. To me, that feels right. And then after that, hopefully we can get some fan cases going and I can get back to writing my campaign stories, which I've showed you in the previous developer diary. I read a little bit from it. I've written quite a bit. I've outlined 10 or 12 cases. And I'd love to have real collaborators on that as well. That's a little trickier because I am invested in the protagonist and the storyline, and you have to hear all about the spoilers if you want to work on that with me. But I'm still interested in collaborators for that since it's such a big project. But if you're interested in writing, you can choose. Do you want to make your own detective and your own stories, or do you want to help with the main campaign, etc.? So maybe we'll stop here and we'll try in 2 weeks or so to have a discussion based on, now that this has been covered, the mechanics, the base stuff has been covered well enough. Next time we can start talking about some fancier mechanical ideas that I haven't talked about, evidence grids, criminal histories, fingerprints, all kinds of crazy ideas we can talk about. But maybe we'll save that for another stream, and instead we'll just talk in the chat a little bit if people have questions, ideas, thoughts. Guide for case writers would be super helpful. I jumped back in the Discord to see if I can help. Okay, so let me just show you a little bit. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I showed this a little bit. This is not the rule book. There's the rule book in the front, which Debbie and I have been working on. See if I can give this a wider view here. So we've got a little bit of a rule book that needs some work, and then a whole bunch of other little documents that I've been working on. This is another one of Adam Hall's piece of art. Little discussion essay about where liberties have been taken in reality. And then, as Megan was talking about, I've been working on a couple of documents to talk about writing cases for high and low, how it differs from Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, both in mechanics and style, thinking about writing your case. And then I've started rewriting this differently again, a separate little document. That my idea is to really give a case writer some help in writing cases, some structure, because high and low is a little bit more structured than Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. It's broken up into days. Events should be happening between days. There's an end of day briefing that works in a specific way. So you can see I'm trying to focus on, and these are just drafts, I'll be working on this more, but I am very much focused on giving guidance to people who want to write cases. Of course, you could do whatever you want. If you know what you're doing, if you're someone like Martinez who's naturally skilled at writing cases, then you don't need that. But for others, especially for this, and then this is some of my chapter 1 of my campaign that I went through in the previous developer diary. And some of this is a little bit of spoiler, but not much, just to give you a feel what an end of day briefing might look like. But don't look too closely at some of that because that gives away the story. Okay. All right. Any other questions, ideas? Thoughts? While I'm waiting for people who have suggestions and ideas, let me talk a little bit about, so I'm very interested in the idea of using this as developing systems and frameworks, not just writing specific stories. So I would be more than happy to sort of just be the support service behind the scene and let other people write cases and write stories, and I'll just be the helper. And then we can even play them on the channel and talk about them. But I am very interested in understanding what makes the best of these cases work and what new ideas we can bring to the table. And can we develop a kind of philosophy of making a mystery game? Now, I have some theories about what makes Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective so compelling. And a large part of that has to do with it being a true narrative story, and so leaning into that. But I have a bunch of ideas, and we've seen a bunch of experimental mechanical things tried in Gumshoe, and I'm very interested in exploring why those things work when they don't work. How could you get a sort of resource management, push your luck element into these games, or when doesn't it work? Solving the issues of difficulty levels. So all of those things are things I'd like to talk about more. John Keane, who's been working on a new version of Razorhurst, wrote a print and play game called Razorhurst that's behind me here. You kind of can't see it. There it is behind me. Highly recommend. Been quite influential on some of the ideas we've been talking about. He's working on a new Razorhurst 2. Maybe John Keane has expressed some interest in getting involved in the project after he finishes. But I do want to spend some future live streams soon having much more open-ended discussions about some of these design ideas. So even if you don't have anything to say now, I do hope you'll join me for those, because those won't be just me talking. Those will be some back and forth brainstorming about design ideas and getting feedback on some much more experimental ideas. And I do think one of the appeals of this project is as a sort of experimental laboratory for trying some of these ideas. So I would love to see people try some real experimental storytelling and game making in this world, and I'm interested in doing a little bit of that myself. And let's see. Okay. Zach says, even a one-page sample mystery would be useful for people to see how to make one themselves. Yes, I agree. Perry says, I'd love to write some occult-related cases, but would need a guide as I haven't done any of this before. Martinez says, Jesse, for a demo case, would you prefer the existing start for Jack Deverell? Well, it can't, the starting demo case, here's the one constraint. It has to be playable in an hour or two. That's the only real constraint on the demo day one case. So all of the stuff I've written for my campaign is much too verbose. This one has to be, the starting of the demo has to be much more of a hit the ground running prologue, prelude. So none of the stuff I've written can be used because it's like 4 pages of text before you even start. So I think the demo cases sort of can be anything, except it should teach you the basic rules, but the main constraint is it has to be playable in an hour or two, and the players have to be able to jump right in. Like, you can't hit them with 5 pages of text before they start. So that's what's going to have to be different about that. It doesn't have to be the main protagonist for the campaign. It could be anyone. It could be, as I said, I'd love to see people try to make some real experimental work set here, and I'd love to see someone create a female protagonist, black protagonist. I mean, you could imagine they would have a very different experience in New York City in the 30s than your traditional noir detective. So I would love to see some social commentary cases, all that kind of stuff. If you're interested, I hope you'll stop by the Discord. There's a whole bunch of channels where we talk about this stuff constantly. As I said, I would love to have more help work on this in a variety of areas. You can pick an area that you feel interested in and work on that. We still have to figure out allies and recurring characters. So someone could write maybe someone focused on writing a couple of interesting characters that might show up as guest stars in various places. We could use people making real sort of sections that are just a little bit of brushes with history. So one of the things I've talked about that I find so enjoyable in some of these cases is just rubbing shoulders with celebrities and famous people, and we'll want to do a lot of that in High and Low. So you'll be going to real museums, seeing real pieces of art, meeting real people. Some of my favorite times in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective have been what I call time travel tourism, encountering real life history and people. And so if people are interested in that part, I'm sure the case authors would love some help writing little sidebar short sections where they encounter real history. Macon Leary says, I can't do noir, but I'm wondering if I could write a PG Woodhouse detective pastiche set in 30s. I mean, the only constraint here is that these are the locations in New York City in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, or 20s to 50s, anywhere in that range. But you could make an alternate reality world where there are monsters and magic, whatever. I'm all for it all. And I'd be happy to play it on the channel and talk about it and give you feedback. Any other thoughts? Ideas? Maybe I'll put up the philosophy slides for people to chew on it. So this is just a list to sort of get you thinking the way I'm thinking of this, which is that I keep encountering these questions, okay? How fine-grained should as a very concrete example, how fine-grained should the yellow pages be? Should I have 200 categories? Should we have 10 categories, etc.? And like most of these questions, it feels like it's sort of intuitively answered. Like, okay, let's look at the categories that Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective used or Gumshoe used, and some of them do different things. And so I think it's good in these cases to go back to foundations and say, what's the goal? What's the criteria by which we evaluate whether we've got the right answer rather than just working on intuition? And it feels like a lot of these questions have that flavor where we don't really have a formulated philosophy that guides these questions. And I tried to summarize it for the yellow pages. So I thought, well, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is to avoid a case where a person is looking for something and they conclude it doesn't exist. That's the worst scenario you'd have. If they hear the person went to a ice cream store, you need to make sure that when the person looks up, they don't say, okay, let me check cafes, and they can't find the place, and they're like, okay, I guess we can't find that. So your primary job is to make sure that a person wouldn't look one place when they should look somewhere else. So that's why I've tried to have these see also places to try to solve that. And then there are other requirements. You'd like to say, well, it would be ideal if there weren't like if each section wasn't so long that it feels overwhelming. That's a little bit in conflict with not having too many overwhelming categories. So it's a little bit of a balance, but all of those are examples of questions that I would like to see if we can't formulate a philosophy behind. Anyway, so give a little bit of thought to that. Let's see. I think you mentioned that one of the neighborhoods would be called Negro Harlem. I have reservations. Well, I have reservations about that as well. So since that's been brought up, let's talk about it a little bit. In the WPA book, the Bible that we've been using, that is what that area of Harlem is referred to. There's up here in Harlem is broken down into Central Harlem, Italian Harlem, Spanish Harlem, and Negro Harlem. Now, Negro is a term that's absolutely fallen out of favor, although it's not a slur. It just feels very dated and stylized. And you certainly couldn't use a term for that wasn't in use at the time. So you can't call this African American Harlem. You could call it Black Harlem, or you could say we're not going to refer to that the way it was referred to elsewhere. And I would put all of that. I'm not wedded to calling it the term that this book used. I think Black Harlem would be a completely reasonable compromise. But it's just one piece of a larger issue. And I started writing up a little thing about here. So first of all, I've talked a little bit about some exaggerations, references to real people, just sort of trying to explain my philosophy for how close it has to be to reality and how many liberties are being taken. But I have started writing up a little thing here. So I've sort of tried to do worst case scenario here. So let's just see. Much of the text and dialogue in High and Low may be jarring and offensive to modern ears. Some terms that were commonplace in the 1930s are rightly considered inappropriate in our current day. We've tried to capture the exaggerated language and attitudes of the time period in the voices of the characters being depicted. The characters described here behave in the stylized, stereotyped roles seen in noir movies of the 1930s and 1950s. Misogyny, sexism, racism, stereotyped gender roles, profanity, smoking, and drinking are all commonplace in this world, much as they were in America itself during this time period. They're largely presented here without criticism and treated unironically and uncritically. These stories are not intended to be an endorsement or glorification of the attitudes of this fictional genre or this time period in actual American history. This game does not provide a meaningful commentary on past societal oppression, culture, and norms. Those hoping for a more critical analysis of behaviors and attitudes seen in the game will need to look to external sources. Some suggested references are listed below. You're, of course, encouraged to bring your own critical analysis of the text to the material. These stories are focused on providing an escapist experience, a chance to spend time in the company of a fictional protagonist raised in a different time and in a world that in many ways only ever existed in the film noir movies of a forgotten era. High and Low is a narrative game. If you find yourself confronted with having to make a choice in the game that you find particularly morally objectionable, feel free to write your own alternative narrative branch and share it with the community. The building blocks are designed to be freely available for anyone to make and share their own cases. We encourage others to create and share stories that include social and political commentary that reflects the real-life struggles of the time. So this basically sums up my attitude, my approach. This is going to be an adult game. We're not going to worry about commercial viability. That gives us a little bit of the freedom to take a position. And this is basically my position, to err on the side of being adult and expecting this to be a game for adults to bring their judgment to. And the way I think you solve these things is by having a variety of views. And I hope we will get some cases written by people with a different perspective, with some political, societal standpoint. But I'm not... and don't want to be shocking just for shocking's sake, but I do want my interest in my story writing is to err on the side of this. But I hope other people say other things. But you could make the case, you could make the case that the base materials should be free of such opinions. Only a specific storyline case should tiptoe into those areas. So I could be convinced that some terminology, there are compromises like Negro and Black are completely reasonable to me, and that seems like a possible thing. But I'm not going to worry about politically correct language here. It doesn't make sense in the context of a 1930s film noir feel. That's my view. Let's see. Megan says, maybe just called Harlem, differentiate Spanish Harlem, Italian Harlem. Originally, it just was Central Harlem, North Harlem, South Harlem, East Harlem. But it's a little hard to remember it. So that's why when we came across this, what we're treating as the Bible of New York City at the time, this WPA guide, which you can find all over eBay and Amazon, we're using the terms that they use, but it could be changed. Debbie says, we want to be careful not to glorify the era if we go that route. Debbie says, I have a strong preference for period-appropriate names, terms, as long as they're not deliberately insulting. What kind of character should Jesse be? Muckraking journalist. This is, maybe it's an interesting point. I'm not gonna. We don't have to make ourselves characters, but if you do collaborate and if you are involved in the game, we can certainly put you in the directory. Maybe Logan could use you as a sketch. So there'll be plenty of opportunity to put little Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the game. I keep joking that we'll sort of sell off real estate. So for $1, you can reserve yourself a home in a tenement in the Bowery. For a couple $100, I'll give you a mansion on the Upper East Side. For a couple more bucks, we can give you a Yellow Page ad. Martinez says, Jesse, is Jack Deverell a version of yourself? No, I can't sketch. But, you know, I guess everyone brings in their own background to some of these stories. I'm not a skilled writer. I am, however, making my way through lots of books on writing stories and commonalities between stories. There's Joseph Conrad's Monomyth. I've recommended a couple books before that I really like. One is by a guy named Will Story on writing stories, and the other one I forgot is by a guy who's written a book called How to Write a Damn Good Mystery and a Damn Good Novel, other stuff. Soon I'm going to bring out a bunch of these books. I have a live stream and we'll talk about that. If you're interested in writing and getting into writing a case, we'll have some discussions about theories of storytelling. And I'm very keen. It completely matches this idea of having systems because in a way there are some formulas for making stories compelling. And Will Story has this idea of a fatal flaw of a protagonist. And the guy, I forget his name, who did Damn Good Mystery has a little tweaks on that. And all of these Joseph Conrad discussions of the monomyth talk about why there are these common elements in stories, the quest and the birth and death and rebirth, all these things, and how these central figures come up again and again, like the wise old man. You can see it in Lord of the Rings. You can see it in Star Wars, in the Bible. All of these things keep cropping up again and again. And my campaign story tries to use all of that. And I have some ideas, actually, that I've talked about Martinez about sort of recursive patterns of fatal flaws. Will Story has this really interesting point. So I wish I could remember the guy who wrote Damn Good Mystery, but he basically has a little bit of diversion here. He basically says, look, for people to care about the protagonist, they have to have some real special skills and flaws. And if the protagonist has some special skills, it doesn't even almost matter what they are. If they're like a violin, a great violin player, and you harp on that, the players will like that person for their skill, even if they're a mean, nasty person. And then it's important for them to have a flaw. And then Will's story goes a little bit further than that. He says it's really important for the person to have, I think he uses the word fatal flaw. And he has a really interesting point. He says, no, it's not fatal flaw. It's sacred flaw. And that was this key idea he had. And he said, look for what people treat as sacred. Look for what people consider sacred. And that's where you'll find the irrationality. People are irrational about the things that they hold sacred. And if you think about it that way, what you get is you get people flirting with tragedy because they're locked into this sacred view that's broken of the world, of how things work, and how a story should bring them into confrontation with their sacred flaw. And then either they resolve it and learn, and then you get a happy ending, or you get a tragedy. It's a theory, as Martinez is talking about here, about a flawed theory of control of the world, a sacred flaw that is important to them, and that how that is runs into conflict with the real world in the story. And they either resolve and fix their theory of control, or it kills them. And so I had some interesting ideas I shared with Martinez about how you could sort of, how you do that in a case that's meant to wrap up. That's typically you're thinking of a novel where you've got these patterns. How do you do it in a game where each case is a standalone chapter? I had some theories about sort of doing a recursive thing where in the overarching campaign, it's the protagonist character arc that has the sacred flaw that they confront to get a happy ending. But maybe in case by case, you reverse that and say that the villain is basically the star, the person with the sacred flaw that gets a tragedy told of them in one case. So that's my theory, that sort of an overall campaign is a protagonist arc of a successful, happy story. And then each case is a tragedy told from the point of view of the villain, which matches also my theory that what's interesting about these cases are the villains. So we'll talk about that in a future live stream. Probably we should wrap it up here. Any last questions? Rob says, post a list of recommended books for writers. Yes. Well, if you join the Discord, I'll start. Well, I've got about 100 documents now for high and low, various little short essays on fonts and all that. We'll make a book. I'll make a document of recommended books if you want to get on board here and go through and we can talk about them. The campaign absolutely has cases that start and end in one chapter, and then one case that continues through the whole 12 chapter arc. So the campaign ideas has a lot. It's ambitious, and we'll see if it works. All right. Anything else to talk about before we wrap this up here after an hour and a half? Take home messages. I'd love for you to get involved and help and collaborate and help us bring this to life. And if you are interested, stop by the Discord or the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. There's a link to that on the About page. There are some threads there about high and low. If you prefer to talk sort of asynchronously rather than in a Discord, that's fine too. Anything else I haven't covered for today? I think that's it. Maybe we'll wrap it up here. I'll see some of you for our next playthrough of Penny Dreadfuls in the next, either tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to see if I can get some sleep. If I can, maybe we'll play tonight or tomorrow. We'll get back to playing some games this month. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.